Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at World War II, but not just as a devastating historical event. We're going to examine it as the ultimate global catalyst. It was this massive crucible of destruction that literally rewired human history. Okay, let's dive right into this. What does the deadliest conflict in human history have to do with your kitchen microwave? I know, it sounds like a completely absurd question, right? But stick with me because by the end of this explainer, you're going to see exactly how the horrific crises of global warfare directly forge the modern world you interact with every single day. To make sense of this complex history, we're going to follow a clear narrative arc. We'll start with the global powder keg, move into lighting the match, navigate the Eastern meat grinder, explore the laboratory of war, and finally look at birthing the modern world. Let's start with Section 1, the global powder keg. So before a match is struck, you need the right conditions for an explosion, right? And the unresolved resentments from World War I created an incredibly volatile environment. The 1919 Treaty of Versailles absolutely sparked deep German revanchism. You've got these crushing financial reparations, severe military limits, and they lost 12% of their pre-war land. Then, when the Great Depression hit in the 1930s, it completely destabilized the Weimar Republic. People lost faith in liberal democracy, and this instability threw the doors wide open for totalitarianism. It allowed figures like Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party to seize absolute power by 1933, basically promising to undo those exact provisions. The crucial point here is that the rise of these totalitarian regimes kicked off a massive wave of aggressive expansionism. In 1931, Japan invades Manchuria looking for resources. By 1935, Mussolini's Italy invades Ethiopia to build a new Roman Empire. And then, in 1936, Germany remilitarizes the Rhineland, which was a direct violation of the Treaty of Versailles. And the League of Nations, well, they proved completely helpless. Relying on unanimous decisions and basically useless economic sanctions, they just couldn't stop this global wave of militarism. That brings us to Section 2, lighting the match. With global powers completely failing to contain this aggression, eruption into total war was just a matter of time, and events started cascading like dominoes. First, you have the 1938 Munich Agreement. This was the absolute peak of appeasement, where British and French leaders formally let Germany annex the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia, just hoping it would be Hitler's last demand. But of course, it only emboldened him. By August 1939, a shocking new pact was signed, and mere days later in September, the invasion of Poland began. Now, what's really interesting about this pact is the stark contrast between its public face and its private reality. On the surface, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was a 10-year non-aggression treaty between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. The world thought these two massive powers had actually agreed to peace. But the terrifying truth was hidden in a secret protocol. This was a hidden agreement to explicitly divide independent countries like Poland, the Baltic states, and Romania into German and Soviet spheres of influence. It was this secret carve-up of Eastern Europe that let both sides invade Poland without fearing each other, which officially triggered the Second World War. Moving on to Section 3, the Eastern meat grinder. We're shifting focus now from high-level global politics to the brutal, ground-level devastation of the war's deadliest theater. The sheer geographical scale of this conflict across Europe was just immense. In June 1941, Hitler took his greatest gamble. He shattered that non-aggression pact with Stalin by launching Operation Barbarossa. This was a massive 3 million-man invasion of the Soviet Union. Hitler thought the Soviet structure was completely rotten and would just collapse. But instead, he opened up a front where more combatants would be killed than in all other theaters of World War II combined. "We will defend the city or die in the attempt." Those chilling words from General Vasily Chukov perfectly encapsulate the demonic fury and absolute desperation of the Battle of Stalingrad. This wasn't just a battle. It was a grueling, house-to-house, factory-to-factory struggle where snipers were used to devastating effect. The Germans fought to crush the city and exterminate the population, while the Soviets fought to defend the sacred soil of Mother Russia at literally any cost. To put the human cost of this single, pivotal battle into perspective, it's just staggering. We're talking 850,000 casualties for the Axis forces and 750,000 casualties for the Soviet forces. That is over 1.5 million casualties in one single city. Stalin considered these unimaginable losses strictly necessary because surrendering Stalingrad would have meant an irreversible victory for the Nazis. Ultimately, the Red Army's victory at Stalingrad was the massive turning point of the war. Surviving this unimaginable crucible allowed the Soviet forces to launch a massive counteroffensive. They drove the Wehrmacht entirely out of Russia, steadily pushing the enemy all the way back to Berlin.
And crucially, this drew away essential German forces that could have been used to defend against the Allies in Normandy.
We now arrive at Section 4, the Laboratory of War. We're doing a hard narrative pivot here, zooming out from the bloodiest battlefields to the laboratories where desperate, high-stakes innovation was happening. And this brilliantly illustrates the answer to our opening hook. Look at the cavity magnetron. During the war, this little palm-sized device was created to generate micro-wavelengths to drastically improve the accuracy and range of combat radar. But after the war, an American engineer working on this combat tech realized that these same radar waves could melt a candy bar right in his pocket. So that deadly military technology was repurposed, and it literally gave birth to the commercial microwave sitting in your kitchen right now. Crazy, right?
$400,000. That was the astronomical price tag in 1946 for a machine called ENIAC. So, what was ENIAC? It was a massive 1,500 square foot general-purpose computer that required 40 giant cabinets. It was originally designed for the military to rapidly perform complex calculations. You see, the desperate need to process wartime data pushed computing technology forward by leaps and bounds, directly laying the groundwork for the digital age we live in today.
But it definitely wasn't just machines and weapons. A massive medical revolution took place too. The sheer scale of trauma on the battlefield demanded literal medical miracles. We saw massive improvements in blood transfusions, skin grafts, advanced out of pure necessity to treat millions of wounded soldiers, and most astonishingly, the mass production of penicillin. Scientists collaborated on deep tank fermentation to produce 2.3 million doses of this miracle drug just in time for the Normandy invasion in 1944. It's a profound duality, really. The very same war that caused unprecedented destruction also rapidly produced medical advancements that have saved countless lives ever since.
Which brings us to our final act, Section 5, Birthing the Modern World. As the physical fighting stopped, the technologies forged to win the war immediately laid the foundation for the geopolitical struggles of the late 20th century. The atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki ended the fighting in the Pacific, sure, but their existence instantly ignited a global arms race. The creation of nuclear weapons permanently changed human existence. It fundamentally altered international diplomacy and redefined military strategy, with the looming threat of mass destruction, locking the US and the USSR into a decades-long struggle for global dominance. Let's move on and see how this builds into the space race, because this intense military rivalry didn't just stay on Earth. In 1957, the USSR launched the Sputnik 1 satellite. Fearful of Soviet superiority in space, the United States Congress swiftly approved the creation of NASA in 1958. This massive mobilization of science and resources eventually peaked in 1969 when the Apollo 11 crew landed on the moon. The rockets that eventually took humanity to the stars were direct descendants of the aeronautic technology developed for global war.
So what does this all mean? Why does this matter to you? Because every single time you check the weather radar to track a storm, every time you take antibiotics for an infection or heat up your leftovers in a microwave, you are interacting directly with the scientific legacy of World War II. The standard tools of our daily, peaceful lives were quite literally forged in the fires of this global conflict.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought to ponder. If the most devastating crisis in human history birthed the technologies that define our modern era, what might the crises of today be building for our future? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.